Hi boys and girls, welcome back to art. So today we're going to actually be creating a new art project. You are learning about the artist Wayne Thiebaud and how he did a lot of foods and desserts in his artwork. And so we're also going to, and hopefully you listen to the story, and we are going to be drawing our cupcakes today and painting them and adding some color. This is only a piece of drawing paper. It is not printer paper. You don't want to use that. We're going to be using watercolors and a Sharpie and a pencil first for you boys and girls at home, and then you'll trace over it with a Sharpie. You cannot use washable marker on this, boys and girls, because it will get washed off and into your artwork. You can also use crayon instead if you don't have a black Sharpie marker. So either a black Sharpie marker or crayon, no washable markers. So we're going to start off with drawing our cupcake, and this is just an idea of how to draw one. If you want to change it and draw it differently, there are so many different ways to draw a cupcake. You can even look online to see if there's another way that you would like to draw it. So the very first thing I'm going to start off doing is I'm going to start off up here towards the top of my paper, because I'm going to use the rest to be drawing the icing and the bottom of my cupcake. So I'm going to add a cherry to mine. You do not have to do this, boys and girls. This is just a suggestion. So I'm going to start off drawing a circle. But I don't want it to look like a circle. I want to actually make it look like my cherry has some shape to it. So I'm going to add a little curved line, almost like a small smiley face to it, so that I'm going to give it a little bit more depth and make it look less flat and like a circle. And then I'm just going to add a black or line onto it with a little dot at the top so that it looks like a cherry. So the next thing I'm going to make is the icing, and I want mine to be in layers so that maybe I can do different colors, or it looks like when the icing is swirled up on your cupcake. So the way I'm going to do that is when the cupcake's at the top, it's smaller and it kind of goes wider as you go down, like a triangle in a way, or like a tower. So I'm going to create curved lines, almost like a cloud. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you want to do 3, that's fine, or you want to do more, careful how much more you go, because it might be like this big old shape, and you want to make sure it's not going straight up and down like this. You want to make sure it has kind of a triangle shape to it. So I'm going to try to come on this side and do the exact same thing, kind of even. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, and I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to make sure that I've kind of done my triangle shape here. And if I haven't, then I can erase my pencil. Miss Shop is using a Sharpie instead, because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a curved line. I don't want to make it straight. We want to make it kind of curved and connect over here. So I'm going to actually take and draw my line like that to create that curved line. And so I also want to make it look like my cherry is sitting on top of that icing. So I'm going to add just a little line here like this, and another one over here, so it actually looks like my cherry sitting in the icing. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make that curved line in there just like that. Then I'm also going to come in and I'm going to add that line. And these are some things, like I said, you don't have to do this, boys and girls. These are just suggestions and ways of doing it. You don't have to. But then I'm going to come in and I'm going to do another one, and you don't have to do 4 layers. I'm doing that. This is going to actually be my cupcake down here, and it's 3 layers of icing. So I'm going to actually go back in, and I'm going to make that zigzag line here, because if you've ever looked at a cupcake, the top of it's kind of zigzag. So I'm going to take and I'm going to make a small zigzag, not a really big one, but I'm gonna make a zigzag, and I want to go across to this line over here and make sure that they connect. Now a cupcake has kind of a shape where it's like this, where it's wide here and kind of comes smaller down here. So what I want to do is create a curve, not a curved, kind of a diagonal line here, but I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, trying to make it even and the same length here. And then I'm going to take and make a curved line down here, boys and girls. And this is now where we can go in and we can add some details to our cupcake. Like I might take and make some lines in here where each zigzag comes down, and I'm just very gently, I'm not pressing down hard with my another thing is when you're making the lines, I noticed how on the middle ones I make them straight, but notice how these follow the angle of this. So when I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I follow my line. So look, I follow this line, but as I get closer to the middle, my lines get straight so that they are straight up and down. So like here, my line is nice and straight, but the other ones kind of go out to the side of the cupcake. So now I also wanted to add a little bit of sprinkles in my cupcake. So I'm gonna just take and make small rectangles like this, but I also want to make sure that I spread them out and put them going in different directions. So I'm going to make sure that my sprinkles look like I sprinkled them on instead of laying them out in neat rows, because they don't look like that when we have cupcakes. So I'm just going to do them on here. Remember, this is my actual cupcake here, so this is not icing. So I'm not going to put my sprinkles in there. I'm just going to put them on the icing. So now I get to go in and add some color, boys and girls. So again, we're gonna use crayons and watercolors to work inside our cupcake. But if you don't have some of these materials at home, boys and girls, feel free to use colored pencils, markers, crayons, watercolors. If you want to paint it and you can do that with like staying in and making it neat, you can. I'm going to be using crayons and watercolors in this. Do not use washable markers and watercolors, because when you use washable markers on here, it's going to create the watercolor, the markers to spread out in your ink. So one of the things I also am going to add to my cherry here is kind of a highlight there, like for where the light's reflecting. I'm also going to go in that area, and I'm going to color it in white, so that way when I go in to paint, that paint. So right now I'm coloring in this little piece that I added on to my cherry to show light reflecting and added highlight to my cherry. But I'm also going to go in and do it on the sides here. I'm just adding white crayon, and the reason I'm doing that is because when I actually go in to paint, that paint is going to resist where that wax is at, and it's not going to let me paint that area, and you'll be able to see the wax crayon showing through and showing the highlights on the side of my cupcake. So right now I'm just adding white crayon, like so, little highlights, and you'll see it in a little bit when I start painting. And I'm also going to use crayon to color in these sprinkles, because it's going to be really hard to try to paint neatly inside of those sprinkles with a watercolor paintbrush. So I'm actually going to use crayon, and then I can just paint right over it, since it's just going to move away from it and not actually color it. So I'm just using crayons to come in and add color to my sprinkles. So I have my sprinkles colored in so that they're nice and colorful in my artwork. And I did add some white here along the sides with my white crayon, so that way when I paint, the watercolors are gonna resist with that wax on there, and you're gonna be able to see my highlight that I added to the side of my cupcake here. Not only am I adding light to my cupcake, but I also want to add some value and dark in my cupcake so that it shows that I have some light and dark and some shadow areas. So I plan on doing my icing with brown. So what I'm gonna try to do is take a brown crayon and I'm gonna add some areas where I think it would be a little darker, like towards the bottom of each layer. I'm gonna add a nice dark area, same thing underneath that cherry where it's a little darker than some of the other areas. So again, here towards maybe the bottom. I am going to be painting there too, boys and girls, but this way I just kind of add some of that crayon to it and see if I can add some value to it, make it look a little bit darker. Same thing underneath the layer so that I can add some value to my artwork and some just a little bit of texture too, so that it looks a little bit different and it looks a little bit more realistic instead of just flat paint. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and add my crayon. So I'm going to be using brown in my icing to make it chocolate, and then I'm going to make my cupcake, the cake, yellow, since this is one of Mrs. Shop's favorite flavors, is yellow cake with chocolate icing. So I'm just going to add, like I said, some areas in here that are darker. I'm even going to add it underneath here where that layer is sitting, kind of casting that dark shadow on it. I'm also going to be doing some areas in here. I'm going to change, I've used brown and yellow in here. I also want to go back in with my cherry and do the same thing where I add, this was the highlight over here, maybe some dark in here and also some dark inside where that little line is at. So that way when I go to paint, it'll be lighter in these areas. So I'm also going to do the same thing with my cupcake. All right, so I'm ready to actually paint. I have not colored the entire thing. You can see that I've just added some areas where it's really going to kind of bring out that color and not make it so flat on my paper, and hopefully add some shape to my cupcake and make it look a little bit more real. And you guys can do other things if you want to do that and change it up. If you need to use marker and then crayons, or marker and then colored pencils because you don't have paints at home, that is fine too, boys and girls. Now let's get started with painting. So we are making a mixed medium art piece on this because we are using multiple things. I used crayons and I'm using watercolors, and part of watercolors is using water because we have to use the water in order to activate the paint. And these are just basic Crayola watercolors that you would find for students, and we're just going to use those, and I'm going to come in and paint in my cupcake. Remember, when we're holding our paintbrush, boys and girls, we want to make sure that we're holding it up here so that we're not way too far back and we don't have control over our brush. Another thing is we don't want to press down so that our brush is fanning out like this, because we tend to rub our paper that way, and we just want to be gentle brushing on there so that we don't rub our paper and we don't put holes in it. So that's why I recommend using, like I'm using this art paper, but I also have watercolor paper if you need that up here. So please, just if you need paper, come and ask. And if you are working with dry medium with the markers and the crayons, then you can use any paper. So I'm going to use my water, and I'm just going to start off with the cherry on the top. And again, you don't have to dig in the paint to get it to work, boys and girls. You just need to be gentle and brush inside your paint so that you're not damaging it, your brush or the paint, and digging holes in it. So, and then I'm just going to gently, see, I barely have to touch that, boys and girls, and I just paint right over it. And I'm just going to paint and create that color on there, and then I'm done. But I barely touched it so that I'm not going outside of the lines or making a mess with my artwork. But I'm going to make sure I wash off my brush before I go into my next color. So the next color, I'm going to actually do my yellow next, just because it is a light color and I like to use my lighter colors sometimes first, but that's just a preference. You don't have to do that, boys and girls. So I'm just brushing in my paints, and again, I just come in and I gently brush in my watercolors. Again, this is not watercolor paper, and you will notice a difference when you are using watercolor paper or if you're using art paper. The watercolor paper just works better with things that are wet. So I'm gonna make sure that I washed off my brush each time, and I'm gonna paint the rest of this. And again, this is simple watercolors, boys and girls. You're just painting on your watercolors after you've added some of that dark and light with your crayon. All right, boys and girls, so I finished painting. You can see like this is not gonna, don't worry about things on the outside because I was like testing my crayon and things like on it. We are going to be cutting these out, but right now I'm going to let it dry because I don't want to try to cut it out when it's wet. It'll rip easier. You can see where I've added the white crayon and it shows some highlights in my artwork, so that it shows like light is shining down over here. So we're going to let these dry, and I hope you enjoyed the story this week, and we are going to come back next week and we're going to create those backgrounds and cut out our cupcakes to really finish our art piece. Bye, boys and girls.